Welcome to the Find Your Fire Tribe. It's another Fire Friday, and I am always so delighted to join you for these exciting, chi energizing, uplifting events or mind-opening events. Today, I have with me Dr. Kamane Soman and 4 dogs who are making that noise outside and probably will continue to, and a multitude of birds on the hill. For those of you who might be watching this for the first time, I'm Wendy Oching, founder of Healing Spaces Caribbean. Yes, I'm the tribe mom of the Find Your Fire Tribe. And it's always a pleasure to bring these fascinating speakers to the tribe. If you join us live, please type #live. If you watch the replay, please type #replay in the chat and let us know your comments and your feedback. Dr. Kamane Soman is going to be keeping an eye on the chat and answering any questions you might have. I'd like to welcome Dr. Soman. She has a fascinating story. The name of our session today is basically the Phoenix, rising from the ashes of domestic violence to a whole and new amazing future. Dr. Kamane Soman, would you like to take the stage and talk to the tribe, tell them a little bit about who you are and your journey?
Thank you, Wendy, so much for having me, and thank you guys for joining in. My name is Dr. Kamane Soman, and I am the founder and president of a non-governmental organization called People Against Domestic Abuse. My journey started at a very tender age when I got married at the age of 21 and had my daughter at the age of 22. Right away, my situation became violent, where my husband at that time became very abusive. For me, just having gotten, married, I just didn't know what to do. Just had a baby. I wasn't sure what to do. So every day I would try to do something differently. So I would try to clean more, cook more, dress more, do things differently so that the abuse can stop. It actually didn't. And it just kept getting worse and worse. Some days were better than some. And some days were really, really hard and very, very trying. As a young mom, as a young wife, I just didn't know what to do. And there were times I tried different avenues. I would have tried church. I would have tried talking to friends. I would have tried talking to family members. And I recognized that people just didn't know what to say or how to help or what to do. But then one day things got so horrible where it is that I actually had to say enough was enough. And being a mom of 2 children, 1 girl, 1 boy, one day my son got up and he said to my husband at that time and to his father, "One day I will get back to you for what you are doing to my mom." And he said some really harsh words. For a young boy, he said some really harsh words. And for me, that was my turning point that very day. That day I knew I had to change the way things were happening. I had to say no, and I had to say enough to show my kids.
How old were you when you had that realization, Kamane?
Sorry?
How old were you when your son said that? How old was he? How old were you when you had that realization?
My son was 6 at the time. He's 18 now. And I had to say no. Hearing a 6-year-old turning around and saying what he said to me, what he said to his father at that time, it stopped me dead in my tracks immediately. And that was the very same night I got a very bad beating where my nose were broken, my ribs were broken. And very next day I got up and I said, you know what, enough is enough. And I left and I started making reports. Going to the police station was a little bit difficult at the time. But I did meet a really nice officer at that time where he gave me some advice. He said, listen, this is what you have to do. And he told me exactly what I had to do. I had to go to the JP and tell her what is happening, and she'll give me a day to go to court. I did all of that. went to court. When I went to court, I actually got a hearing for the following week. When I went to court, I was actually living in the very same house with my husband at the time. And when the police came to drop off the summons, he told the police that, why are you all dropping off a summons to me? She's inside with me. And well, the police knew everything at the time. He knew I had nowhere to go and I had to stay. And I told him, I said, listen, because I was very fearful for my life at that time, because I'm in the same house with him and police is giving him a summons to go to court. And I told him, I said, listen, we will go to court and we will tell the magistrate we're getting help, thinking that when I go to court and I go in front of the magistrate, I'll be able to speak and tell the magistrate exactly what is happening. I wasn't allowed to speak. The magistrate called him up and he said exactly what I said to him. He told the magistrate, listen, we're going to get some counseling and we'll work on it. So the magistrate gave us a day to come back. I wasn't called on to speak. So I felt so overwhelmed. I felt defeated. I didn't know what to do, but I kept pushing through because I knew I had to. I knew I had to live in order to save myself and to save my children. This wasn't the life they were destined for. And this definitely wasn't the life that I was destined for. So the magistrate asked him to go to Trinidad and get some counseling. And he did go, but when he came back, it was very violent. A neighbor had to come and assist. And I went back to the court immediately. And I demanded to speak to a magistrate in chamber, which I was able to get a hearing with a magistrate. And I told him exactly, which was a different magistrate. And she called him to come and he did come in. And she said, why are you beating this woman? And every allegation I brought against this gentleman, he admitted it. I have all my court extract, everything where he admitted it. And the magistrate gave me a protection order. And she laid everything out to him where he couldn't come to the house, but he was allowed to pick the kids up and take them to school. Because I was trying to be fair, I told the magistrate, listen, if I'm staying in the house with the children, let him keep the car. Because she was going to give me the car to take the kids back and forth. And I said, I want to be fair. So if I'm staying in the house with the kids, let him keep the car. So he was allowed to pick the kids up and to drop them to school and drop them back to where I work. And that was the arrangement. And he had to stay away from me. Don't call, don't come to my work, just drop the kids off to my work, etc. That never happened. Well, he picked the kids up but out the road, and every time he comes to pick the kids up the road, he would try to get in an altercation with me. And those days had the people working on the road, they would, come in my defense because I had my kids, and they would tell him to leave me alone, etc. So I went back to the police station and I made another report indicating to them that he was harassing me, he was stalking me. He would pick the kids up from school and take them to his apartment and come to my workplace and pack up. And my daughter would call me and she would say, Mommy, he left us here and I suspect he's coming to your work, so please be careful. And I would have to lock up when she calls me. I would have to lock up and leave immediately, so that he doesn't, get me on the road or anything like that. And that happened for about 3 weeks. And one morning when I stepped out of my door to wait for the kids to walk out the road while I watched them walk out the road so he could meet them, because I'm seeing him just right on the hill, my feet, my legs actually felt so heavy and I just couldn't move. And I turn around and I tell my daughter, and she was in about Form 5 at that time, I said, listen, you need to take your brother and you need to go and meet your dad. Something doesn't feel right with me now, but I'm going to stay here for a while and just compose myself, and I'm going to pray a little bit, but I want you to do one thing for me. As soon as he drops your brother to school and he passed Scarborough traffic light, I want you to send me a text. And she said when she walked out the road, well, she would have said this to me later on. When she walked out the road with her brother, he was like, where's your mom? Where's your mom? And she was like, no, you need to take us to school. I have an exam, Mark needs to go to school. And they got into a little argument. And she said he drove off. And when he dropped my son to school and they passed the traffic light, she sent me a text saying, just past lights. So I left and I went on the road to get a taxi because I didn't want him meeting me on the road. And she would have said this to me later on. When they went in the car, there was a high scent of something smelled like paint in the car. And my younger son would ask, oh, Daddy, what's that? And he said, don't worry about it, that's thinners. And I went to my workplace and I was traveling at that time because he had a car. And when I dropped off from the taxi, strangely enough, this was a taxi that I would travel on and off. He said to me, my mind is so heavy to cross you the street. And I said, oh no, that's fine. I can manage. I didn't think anything of it. And as I crossed the street and I put my keys in the door to open my workplace, which was on the main road at that time, I heard a loud brakes. And when I turned around, he drove his car to me and blocked me in front of my door. And he opened his door and he threw 2 buckets of kerosene on me. And that time he jumped out and threw the kerosene. And he had this box of matches where he kept trying to light the matches and throw it on me. And I held onto his hand and I kept talking to him, thinking that I'm dripping in kerosene at this time. My hair is very long and I'm dripping and covered in kerosene. And I'm talking to him and reminding him of the children. I'm talking to him and telling him, let's talk about this. And he's saying, no, you'd get me locked up after what I did. And I said, no, let's talk about this. Let's think of the children. And I kept talking to him and I kept talking to him, thinking that the more I talked to him, people would start, I'm looking across the street because it's on the highway. And I'm looking on the road and I'm seeing people stopping. And I'm thinking, okay, well, now somebody would stop. And nobody wasn't stopping. And just then, a customer of mine drove up. And I had an alarm at my workplace. And I thought to myself, if this customer could just get me to open the door, I would press the alarm and my boss would know that something is wrong with me. Something is happening. So I told him, I said, listen, if this customer knows that I have a restraining order against you. And if I don't go to him, if I don't open the door, he's going to call the police. So he allowed me to open the door and the customer came in and he gave me a check and he said, I came to pay a bill, and he kept watching me like, what is happening here? And I said, please help me. When I opened the door, thinking that I would open the door and lock it back, he kept holding on to the door, my ex-husband at the time. And the customer said, what is happening here? And he turned and he told the customer, I just threw gas on her. And he grabbed me and he said, run. And he just ran out the door, the customer, with holding me by my hand. And I just ran. And there was this entrance across the street called Cove Entrance. And not thinking, I just ran across the road and I just ran straight down, not thinking it's a lonely road or anything like that. And I just ran and there was this truck coming out and I tried to flag him down and I ran in the middle of the road, but the road is very wide. And he just overtake me and just keep driving. And then I saw a van, like a Jeep, and I ran to it and I jumped in his car and I said, sir, can you help me please? And when I turned around, he said, what's wrong? And when I jumped in the back seat of his vehicle, I could see my husband pull and block him in front. And he said, listen, sir, that woman stole my money. And the gentleman turned around to me and said, why you're a woman like that? Why do you all do men that? And I said, sir, that's my husband and he's trying to kill me. Are you not smelling that kerosene on me? And I'm dripping and soaking wet in kerosene. And he is stunned, he doesn't know what to do. And when I realized my husband at that time is opening the door to grab me, I opened the other door and I just continued to run. But I was running down inside of Cove Entrance. And then I recognized that nobody is stopping. So I turned around and I started running back out. And there was this lady with her car parked. She was waiting to come out and she stopped and I go to open her door and she said, no, just run. And I realized that nobody was helping and I just stand there didn't know what to do, and he was coming closer to me. And then the gentleman realized what I was saying is true, because I guess his car was smelling a high scent of kerosene. And he just drove, grabbed me and pulled me into the vehicle and drove me straight down to the police station. And he told the gentleman that pulled me into the vehicle, because he would have told him that he's going to the children's school to give them poison to drink. And he showed him a bottle of poison, and one was in a chubby bottle. And he said, when he gave my son that, my son would drink it. And I knew that was true at the moment, because my son idolized his father. And the police would have gone to the children's school immediately and secured the children. And they would have taken me up to the hospital, where they would have, at the time I had kerosene down my throat. I didn't even recognize when I was fighting him off and holding onto his hands. There were one point, he said, okay, come into the car and we will talk. And I thought, okay, if I go into the car, when he drove off, I would just, open the door and just jump out of the car. I wasn't thinking logically at that time. And he had a bottle of, I don't know what it was, I assume poison, and he squeezed my mouth and my nose, and he poured. At that time, when the doctor would have tested me, he said my throat would have had a substance in it, and they couldn't tell what kind of substance is that at the time until they do tests. So eventually they would have said I had so much kerosene on me that they needed to get it out of my system and out of my body. And the nurse would have brought 5 liters of, all she had at that time was dishwashing liquid. And she told me just keep using it in my body, and they would have given me drips and stuff like that to get whatever in my system to get it off. The doctor said what it is that he poured down my throat, which wasn't much, because they couldn't get anything when they did the blood work. It would have eaten out the walls in my throat. And he said at some point in my life, I would lose my voice. I thank God today that I still have my voice. Sometimes it gets very raspy and very hoarse, but I still have my voice. The police would have eventually arrested him. My brother-in-law would have had a hand in him giving himself up, and the police would have eventually arrested him. He was incarcerated for just 21 days, and he would have gotten bail. And he told the magistrate that he will go down to Trinidad and he would stay. I was fearful for my life at the time, and my children's life, because he would have indicated to the gentleman that he would give the children poison to drink. He would burn the house down and then drink poison. So at the time, I was very fearful, and the court just, they was like, well, don't worry, he going to Trinidad. There was no way in the system, in our system in Trinidad and Tobago, that stops him from coming back. He could come up on a boat. There's nothing stopping him from coming back. So my boss at the time decided that they would remove me and the children from the property and put me up somewhere where I could stay safe. And I had we had a pet dog at the time that died because we weren't able to come and take care of the dog, and there were nobody. Neighbors were afraid and they wouldn't know what was happening, and unfortunately that pet died. I think he grieved, and he also wasn't getting any food or anything, and he died. And that court system dragged on for about 3 to 4 years before anything vital really happened. He just got something called custodial. Well, he got an attorney by the court, and they never put him on his stand. And it just kept dragging on and on and on, which kept something was really hard for me. Every time he comes to Tobago, I had to, because I didn't have a vehicle at that time, sometimes I would have to travel to go to the court, and he would stalk me. And one day I ended up saying, I told the court that he's stalking me, and I was fearful. And every time court finished, I would leave and I would travel and take my kids and go up country and stay because I was so fearful. There was nothing in place to secure a woman and her children. There's nothing in place for that. And I would just suspect, okay, well, by now he would go down, he would leave. And next day I would come back, and that went on for a period of maybe about 3.5 to 4 years. He got something called custodial sentence, which means hard labor for 3 months. And they incarcerated him in Tobago. He stayed in incarceration for about maybe 2.5 months. He got off on very good behavior and he left and went to Trinidad. I have not heard or seen him since. He had the kids' number where it's that he could call the kids if they wanted. My daughter at that time started going UE, and he could have seen her if he wanted because the court made that decision where my daughter was old enough to speak for herself and she had no problems speaking to him. My son at that time was under 18, and because he was not traumatized, but he was able to very intelligent for a young man. He asked to speak because a probation officer was in charge of the case, and he asked to speak to the magistrate, which was a judge at that time, which is a high judge. And he asked the probation officer, may I have a word with that high court judge? And she was like, sure. And she told him, and the court said yes. And they allowed him to speak. And the high court judge said he's a very intelligent young man. He told me that is his daddy and that would always be his daddy, but he's fearful of him. And he's so fearful of him that he's afraid of what he will do. And the magistrate took that into consideration and made a ruling where my daughter was of age. She could have speak to him if he want. He could have always called the kids at any time. He always used to call my daughter. And only when she said, would you like to speak to my brother, then he would probably speak to him a little bit. That went on. Having going to court for so many years, I recognized that the system is designed to frustrate and fail women in our society. And I decided that I was going to educate myself and educate the public. And I started educating myself. And I started doing legal studies. I started doing all different types of counseling. I got my doctorate in Christian counseling. And I started this NGO, this nonprofit NGO, where I could have assist and help women and girls affected by domestic violence. So we offer all different types of counseling. We offer something.
When did you start your NGO? When did you start People Against Domestic Violence?
My NGO started in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
That was just when we just finished court. I think it was a year before the final hearing. But I started doing all my courses even when I was in court.
And was this
so there were times when...
Was the NGO just you, or did you have people supporting you in this very, very important?
So I have a team of directors. I have a vice president who is the head of the security department. I also have a secretary, and we also have an accountant, and we have volunteers. At the time when I was in court, I had nobody because my friends and my family were afraid. They didn't know how to deal with a violent situation, and they were afraid of him coming by their homes because they also had children and families to protect. And growing up in an East Indian home, we were taught that it's our husband and we forgive, and something they would always say, you make your bed, you lie on it, and you stick through your problems. But I did stick through my problem for 15 years and it wasn't getting any better. And so I started educating myself even before the court system finished. So there were times when I was able to represent myself in court, and the magistrate and judges would have seen the difference in me, and I would have expressed to them what I was doing. And they all were in support of what I was doing. So I was no longer afraid of this gentleman I was able to just walk free. I was no longer afraid. I was so afraid at one time I went to Trinidad, and as I came off the airplane, I saw him, and I turned right around and I told the airport security, and I got back on the very first flight. They kept me in a room, and I got back on the very first flight and went back to Tobago. I was so fearful of this gentleman that I never used to go to Trinidad. I was so fearful. I'm no longer fearful of him. He does not have that right or that fear over me. I'm no longer. So I was able to stand up in court. There were many times I was able to stand up in court and represent myself. And even when the magistrate was ready to make the hearing and the ruling, I was able to put forth my recommendation where it was, I was no longer hateful. I was a forgiving and a peaceful woman at that time. When that hearing had came through and he asked me, you know, what do I want? What do I expect? I'd forgiven this gentleman, and I just wanted this done and over with, and for my kids and I to move on with our life, you know, and I just wanted him out of our lives.
What do you think made that difference? What do you think allowed you to make that transition, Kamane?
For me, there were times in my life during that process where I had nobody to talk to. I had no friends. My family didn't know how to deal with it, but I had to live for my children. And I saw what was happening with my children. So I started in my counseling, I started with what I was dealing with and doing my courses and going through my counseling sessions. I was able to heal myself and able to transition that to my children. So I was able to help not only myself, but my children.
And
during that process.
We have a thank you. We have a question from someone on Facebook asking, do you also work with self-defense instructors to help the people that you are helping?
So I actually don't. And that is one of the things that we were thinking of just before COVID hit. We were thinking of starting because there was a lot of women in our groups ask about it. So no, I haven't. And if there's anybody willing to assist us, definitely.
Okay, well, perhaps one of our tribe might assist you. Now tell us about that. That is an amazing transformation. You have had a horrific journey, and I am floored by the story you told us. And the idea that you have lived through that and transformed into the person that you are now, doing the things you are doing now, is very, very inspiring. I would like you to tell us now more of what you are doing with your NGO, where it extends to, what you offer, how many people you are helping, and perhaps what other people can do to help your organization. That's a lot of questions.
Yeah, definitely. So Wendy, what we do at People Against Domestic Abuse is that we assist women and girls affected by domestic violence. But lately, in the last 3 years, just before COVID struck, we would have had men calling us and saying, listen, this is happening to me, this is happening to me. And we would have done something called a community work where we would start going to communities and talk about domestic violence. And we would have had men standing up and saying, oh, well, I didn't know that was abuse. So we started talking a little more about different types of abuse, because we have physical abuse, we would have emotional abuse, we have psychological abuse, spiritual and economical abuse. So we would have shared on all of those kind of what types of abuse. And when COVID hit, we weren't able to do those things. So I'm grateful that I didn't call my NGO Women Against Domestic Abuse or Women and Girls. I'm grateful that when I started praying about a name, I got people. And I can proudly say today that we help women, we help girls, and we help men.
Fantastic, because men are there are a lot of men who are abused in one of those categories or more, but because of the conditioning we give our men as well, they don't stand up, they don't want to admit it. And so you are allowing them the space where they can admit it. Definitely.
So as I said, we started the NGO, we have a team of directors, we always in need of volunteers because there's a lot of work to be done. When COVID hit, domestic violence were on the rise. And we recognized we were dealing, a lot of people were calling us with a lot of mental health. So we started assisting young people, and we're seeing it happening. We're seeing school violence happening. And it was one of the things I would have talked about during my COVID, when COVID hit, was that I was worried about our young people being indoors, being locked down, locked away. One of the things I recognized, our basic rights were taken away from us when we were locked down during COVID. And I understand the government have their rules, but our basic rights to walk the streets, to exercise, even to sit outside or by a tree to go to the beach, that was taken away from us. So we couldn't have done that. That would have played a lot of mental, that would have created a lot of mental illness in our country. So during COVID, I would have had a lot of women called me, and they didn't know what to do. Their husbands at home, their children at home, they were being abused. Before, they had their work, so they could have run away to work. They didn't have that anymore because some places were closed, so they were at home. One of the things that I did during quarantine or lockdown was I started printing off the forms that the government had. Those forms were for salary grants. So I started printing off those forms. And when I would say survivor, I never like to call people a victim. When a survivor calls me, I take those forms and I go to the homes. Of course, I work very closely with the police, so I let the police know where I am. And I have my head of security who is always there with us. So when I go to the homes, I let the husband know that I came to fill the form out. So while we are talking about the form and filling it out, I was able to get some information on the status of what is happening at the home. So I would be able to do a quick assessment on how quick we need to get that woman out, if it's her and her children, etc., while we were filling out that form. So that form that the government, that salary grant actually helped me so much in getting into homes with our women.
I have some questions for you. Would it be just Tobago women, or are you doing Tobago and Trinidad, or people, I should say, Tobago and Trinidad, or you actually have a wider reach now because so much is done?
Yes. So during COVID, because we had a wider reach, we were able to extend our hand to Trinidad and to different parts of the islands. People would call us, and we would. It's really difficult to do a counseling session on Zoom or on WhatsApp, but we were able to at least let people know, listen, we're here and you have somebody listening. And we were able to give tools and help them come up with plans. One of the things that we do is we help a woman come up with a plan A and B, so that she and the children knows, or he and the children knows what can be done in case of an emergency.
And do you also provide a sanctuary for people who need to leave?
Right. So unfortunately, our NGO is so small and we have no funding. We use our very own funding from our pockets. So we are not able to provide any kind of, we don't have a safe space to place anybody just yet. And there isn't any safe house available in Tobago either. What we have done is we work very closely with the business community. And for COVID, during that lockdown, there was a plus side for us because the guest houses were on lockdown. We were able to remove women and we were able to get them into guest houses and place them for sometimes 3 to a week, up to a week, and then transition them to Trinidad if need be, to a safe house for if it need be for a longer period. So for us, it was a plus, where the places were shut down. Now that COVID has been lifted and guest houses are being opened and places are open, we are no longer to use the guest houses. So a local businessman gave us a piece of land in Tobago. So we at the moment right now where we are looking for funding so we can start building a safe house where we can place people in domestic violence situation.
I have another question. What other ancillary support apart from legal and counseling? This is from Facebook, somebody watching on Facebook.
Right. So we offer something when we have a domestic violence situation and there's children involved. Sometimes we tend to counsel the mom. I do something called family mediation, where once in not a high-risk situation, we do a family mediation. We do something called risk and vulnerability in children, where we do something called color play and risk and vulnerability with the children, so we can easily identify how traumatized these children are in the home and what they have experienced. So we do that also. Legal studies, and as I said, different types of counseling. We do mental health counseling, also grief counseling. I've also started something called color therapy, which has been working really well with my survivors and for mental health patients. We don't give any medication. When we look around today, we look around and we see colors. So we use our colors to help our physical and our mental well-being. And that has been really working really well with our domestic violence survivors.
Now, I've been asking all the questions. Terry and Kamine, would you guys have any questions for Kamane?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that your story is beyond inspiring, and kudos to you for making a bad situation into something very positive, and not only for yourself, but also to help others who may be going through similar circumstances, and keep doing the good work that you're doing.
Thank you very much, Terry. That means a lot.
It's a lot. And when you say similar circumstances, I thought similar hell, because what you went through was hell.
Yes.
Kamane, you were also saying when we talked before that you do this for free. I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about that. There's no money coming in, you're doing this for free. How do you do this? How do you manage?
So we offer all of these services free because having gone through this experience, the court would have said, listen, we want to give you and the kids some counseling because you all need it. Because I was a wreck, because I didn't know what to do. And I had to just keep moving for my kids. And every time I go to the place where the court would recommend, they just stepped out or they're not there, and it just kept going on and on. And for me at that time, I had my work and I had my kids, and my boss, them were really, really nice in giving me as much time as I needed to go to court, so I recognize how hard it is. And when I step back and I look at myself, and no praises for me, I recognize where my inner strength came from. And it came from becoming that strong, powerful, peaceful woman that was inside of me ever since I was growing up. I knew that one day that I would be a strong, powerful woman. I used to actually tell my brother that. I used to tell him I would get bigger than you, and I would be stronger, and I would be a great, powerful woman. And he said, yes, you could do anything you want to do. But being so young, I even actually knew what my words would prophesy into my life. And I recognize how hard it is when you don't have, because I had to take care of my kids and I didn't have money for a therapist. And that inspired me to give back, because even though I wasn't getting back any, even though for me, I felt like the system failed me. I mean, to me, I felt the court failed me. I felt my family failed me, my friends. I could go on and on, but I didn't want to become that negative person.
You didn't want to become the victim. You wanted to be the phoenix.
No.
And
yes.
I
decided that I had to rise above this. And I up to this day, in situations sometimes, I don't know where I get that inner strength from, but I know that I have an inner strength in me that it just rise.
Yeah.
And
with that, Kamane, I would like to say that I have goosebumps listening to you talk about that. And I feel that strength, that courage that you have and that you've shown and that you continue to show every day with the work that you do. And if there are no more questions, I would like to just thank all of you who are here watching. And I particularly want to thank Dr. Kamane Soman for sharing the personal, private, very, very challenging journey, but also her story of rising from the ashes of that journey to become a beautiful, powerful, strong angel phoenix for the people. I'm going to cry, for the women and the men who are in similar situations in Tobago. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Anybody want to say something while I cry? Terry, help.
Oh my God.
I just wanted to share one thing again, you know, with, if there's anybody listening, I wanted to share something. A couple things I would have learned as I go along. And for me, it was a learning experience. And this really helped me in my journey. And this really helped me up to this day in my life. And, you know, my kids are grown. My daughter is almost 24. My son is 18. And they have grown up into beautiful, beautiful, fearless, professional young adults. And I'm grateful for that. But I share this with them constantly. And one of the things I've learned, and I've done this, and I'm sharing this with you all, I've gotten to know myself better. And some of the things I've done to do that is I've determined my values and I set my moral course that I want to live by. I've discovered my own personal, unique personality. I've decided what I want my future to look like, and I strive on that. I focus on my interests and what I enjoy doing. And I discover everyday weakness and strengths. Rising from the ashes of domestic violence, I would have had an abuser that would have put me down so much that I didn't think, that I believed that I was nothing and I couldn't have amount to anything. And today I rose as a strong, powerful, beautiful, peaceful woman. I'm no longer angry. I'm no longer negative. I no longer have hate. I always see the beauty and the good in people. And today I'm proud to say that I have my doctorate. You know, I've studied so hard and I've rose above everything that that person would have said. And I've turned everything that that person would have said about me. And I'm proud to be who I am. And if I had to do that again, to become the person that I am today, I would do it all over again, because I've seen what I've done, how I've helped, and where I am today. And when I look at my kids, they are no longer fearful. They are no longer afraid. They are happy, peaceful, loving adults. And that is what I strive every day to become.
Thank you so much.
Wendy, there should be a standing ovation button somewhere in here.
Well, we got some hearts and kisses on the chat on Facebook, and let's say we're giving her standing ovation.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, Dr. Kamane Soman, I thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm hoping that many people see it and share it. When I do have it posted in our Facebook group, Find Your Fire Tribe, I'll ask you to let people know how they can reach out to you if they want to assist you.
Definitely.
Because it sounds as though you could use some other angels to help with
yes,
this. Yes,
definitely.
Okay, so many blessings. Thank you all. Namaste.
Thank you.